high school developers basically here develop an argument. At one point, this assignment actually then could take the form of a comparative analysis between the novel and its famous, or popular at least, film adaptation. If you're so interested in that, you can reach out to me, and I'll send you some information about how to approach that topic. But because of the nature of the semester that we spent together online, I felt that it was a bit much for me to ask you to go out and watch the film just so you could write a paper. So that option's still available, but let me know if you're interested in that. For the most part, though, I've set aside a few different types of ideas that I think might catch your interest here, labeled A through F. Now, let's take a look at one of these ideas and see how a student was able to apply her perspective to that chapter. And we're going to look at option D here. In chapter 19 of Ready Player One, Wade mentions his sedentary lifestyle and comments about how it's catching up to him. So I'm asking you to do a couple of things here. Define the term sedentary and then describe potential health risks associated with these kinds of lifestyle choices. How does our time spent in virtual realms such as the internet, time spent playing video games and watching television affect our physical health? How does it impact our mental health? And what can we learn about healthy choices based on Wade's approach to his own problem? So I'm going to stop here and just real quickly preview another essay, a argument sample essay, and see how a fellow student approached this process. So I'm going to make this a little larger for you so you can see as I'm reading through here. So again, I've allowed the student to maintain her anonymity, but as you can see, this isn't too far away. This is fall semester 2019, and she wrote her essay on this very topic, the sedentary lifestyle. And she starts by asking a question, which is a good sort of all-purpose technique that you can use as one of those hook sentences, something to capture your reader's attention right away and sort of reel them in to the entire process. The only thing I would caution you on as a writer is that if you ask a question of your reader, try to answer that question before the essay ends. And she starts with a very basic question, especially one as it relates directly to the novel. Do you play video games? How many hours a day do you play? According to data from a Canadian study, shows that the youth of today's world is accumulating an average of 7.8 hours of screen time daily. And she's got a nice reference here. Elena G. LeBlanc and others. She should have a page number here, though, because she's quoting directly. Now, even if you use, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Even if you use APA style, which uses the year-based system, right? Because APA writing style expects you to synthesize more of the information as a paraphrased summary. So when you summarize and paraphrase information in your own language, then you just use the author's last name and the year of the publication from which that information is pulled. If you quote directly, even in APA though, you would have the year of the publication, so the author name, the year it was published, and then the page number. This student though is working in our traditional MLA system, so she should just have a page number. Maybe she neglected to include that. The usage of the internet, TV screens, and online streaming is only going to increase as the world moves into the future with new innovative technological devices. In the modern world, consumerism is also at an all-time high, whether it be adolescent or an adult or even a well-experienced and developed person. people all over the world are consuming advertisements of products instead of knowledgeable information. As a kid on social media or any other type of platform, they see and perceive people playing a new video game and new gaming consoles, and this is only going to make that kid want to obtain it and try it out for themselves. Kids a little bit derisive in terms of the language. You know, I might say adolescent here, but whatever. A kid's a baby goat, and we want to move from more general language to more specific information. Now, I know what you're thinking. A kid is a kid, Mr. Fowler. It's not a baby goat. True, but it could be thought of as a baby goat. And the, loose parlance of American slang is fine for informal writing or discussion of any kind, but you never can tell how wide of an audience you're going to reach. So one thing that we might encourage as instructors, I know that I try to encourage it in a less pushy manner, but this is a good instance of when I will encourage you to do this, is use more specific information, more specific choices in your word selection. So here, something as basic as changing kid to adolescent gives your work a little bit of a stronger vibe in terms of how well it reads. Okay, however, parents, grandparents, guardians, and consumers in general need to properly schedule time for mobile technology to ensure that the technology is not taking a toll on the aspects of physical, social, behavioral, and mental health. And as I say here, nice introduction. This is your thesis statement. Whoops, I usually, let's see, thesis, I'll put a neutral blue color. Okay, so your thesis can be here at the end rather of the, I'll talk about what I was going to say in a second with beginning, but let me start over. Your thesis can and often is traditionally placed as the last sentence of your first paragraph. Now, I might suggest for this essay, since you need to have the space to explain the context of the issue that you're discussing, that you might want to experiment with non-traditional placement for your thesis. Now, your thesis can be anywhere in your essay, realistically, as long as it does appear somewhere, as long as you make your point for your reader and make it clear what it is you're arguing in this instance. But I would suggest you might want to experiment with making the first sentence of your second paragraph your thesis statement. Because here we're talking about video games as one of the pressure points that we have struggled with traditionally as a society to break our young people from, in order to make sure that they're giving adequate time to their play as well as to their physical conditioning. She goes on by talking about video games first. And she says the popularity of video games has always been apparent in the Western world ever since the invention of the first video game Pong in the early 70s. As the years went on, companies realized that the gaming industry had potential to be prosperous. And that doesn't even count slots and other video gaming devices. We've seen those boom in the state of Illinois in the past 10 years. According to Game Industry, the gaming industry in 2018 was worth about $135 billion and could increase to $300 billion by the year 2025. And she's got a nice citation here. She did have a couple of missing commas because Pong, renaming the antecedent of first video game, is actually a move in writing that requires the phrase, the word in question here, Pong, to be surrounded by commas, because it references back to the original noun that named it, right? We call that an appositive. Okay, going on. Now, she has gone out and found her own article to build a discussion with. And she explains it here. In the article, Active Video Games and Health Indicators in Children and Youth, a Systemic Review, the authors introduce a Canadian study that measures health behaviors in students, mostly teenagers, that reveal the majority of children and the youth around the world do not meet current physical activity guidelines and are considered inactive. The youth are considered inactive due to the modern acceptance of the sedentary lifestyle, the state of being idle or stationary. So she defined sedentarism and the lack of physical activity required in physical education. She takes it a step further, connecting it directly to the text, another source that you can use if you're so inclined. The character Wade Watts in Ready Player One by Ernest Cline provides the reader with a great description of just such an idle video game player, to which most players and people generally using the internet can relate. Wade himself explains that I spent the vast majority of my time sitting, getting almost no exercise at all. Physical activity for child development is a very critical aspect of their life. The obvious reasons why physical activity are important are that it makes the body stronger. This includes all of the major systems of the body, the bones, muscles, respiratory system, etc. Many studies around the world have shown that walking just 10,000 steps a day can rehabilitate patients suffering from diabetes and hypertension. Little comma splice there, that should be a period. Walking 10,000 steps a day can even reduce the risk of cancer. Physical movement is also a great way to unleash stress because your body will release endorphins that will stimulate happy feelings. When being sedentary for long periods of time, especially in front of a screen display, not only your physical health is affected. In fact, depending on what you're viewing or playing, your behavior and social skills can be altered due to the exposure of being introverted, creating entirely new sets of demeanors and interactions with family, friends, teachers, and the public. Many profound medical and scientific organizations have found extensive meta-analysis that, quote, exposure to violent video games increases aggressive thoughts, angry feelings, physiological arousal, hostile appraisals, and aggressive behavior, and decreases pro-social behavior. That's not to say this writer's arguing that violent video games cause violence. She's not suggesting that. She's using evidence from Anderson and others' research that suggests if you absorb enough negative content, sometimes that can affect your socio-emotional well-being. And I think that's a fairly safe basis. Now, there are some people that take that a step further, that say that these things cause, problematic behaviors, problematic behaviors like violent video games or people who become active shooters and so on and so forth. Well, maybe not. I know a lot of people play violent video games who are very mellow, but I do think there's a certain logic here that she's arguing with, is that if you spend a lot of time with negativity, that may rub off on your overall worldview. Teenagers and adults can start to immediately show effects after perceiving violence demonstrated by video games. They may also show effects after seeing the violence multiple times while playing. Both men and women around the world are prone to such effects. Understanding this matter can lead an individual to change their patterns of behavior or seek help. These effects can have serious consequences and create unwanted stress and unwanted conflict in one's life. So then she's talking about how not only does the fact that sedentary lifestyle choices and sedentarism impact that kind of thought process, but that overall they can combine to create multiple problems when you account for the socio-emotional side of the impact on the body. Now, although studies show that an excessive amount of time spent on technology devices, sorry, I skipped ahead. Physical, behavioral, and social health can all be affected by spending hours in front of a screen display, influencing a person's mental health too. Hilary Cash, a clinical officer and co-founder of Restart, suggests that internet gaming disorder will become part of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders in the future. Wow. Here now she does have the appropriate page number that we needed earlier. She goes on to explain that psychotherapists have treated her clients before, and most of them have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder. However, therapists are not considering the fact that most of these people are addicted to gaming and the internet. Although studies show that an excessive amount of time spent on technology devices can lead to negative effects, managing time spent on video games, using computers, and manipulating phones and other electronic devices can actually be proven to be beneficial. To further emphasize this point, it's been suggested that certain games can even be beneficial to users if they're not abused. There are games, on computers and phones that can help with fast decision making, improving memory, helping players or users relax, and prolonging or I think she means this. She says prolonging effects from Alzheimer's, and I would say preventing or postponing effects from Alzheimer's. And I comment here, just as a quick side note, there's even been some research done about the video game Tetris as an aid for addressing PTSD in soldiers and civilians who've encountered traumatic events. So if you can get a game of Tetris into someone's hands, it's close to the end of a traumatic event. Some people have said that actually can stem difficult memories and associations with that kind of trauma. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is an interesting point. Now, this particular paragraph is kind of key because this is what's referred to as the refutation. So the refutation is an important point of writing an argumentative paper or writing a persuasive paper, because you should pause at some point in your discussion to consider the other perspective. Are video games really that bad? They don't have any beneficial, feedback or merit at all? No, they do. And there are studies out there that suggest that when used, within a proportionate amount of one's time, video games can actually have some pro-social benefits. So that's not to say that she's arguing against the idea that video games lead to a sedentary lifestyle, which can exacerbate, extant, or even create new mental health issues, but rather that it's the excessive amount of time spent with video games that can create a problem in the long term. And then she moves to her conclusion. But this paragraph, the refutation, is important because it shows that your writer is a dynamic thinker, that she has done research beyond just her perspective, and that she admits there are certain benefits within a certain set of parameters to playing video games. And then finally, she wraps things up using a standard pyramid approach, meaning that you restate your thesis with moving from a very specific piece of information and then expanding by reevaluating your core arguments and ending with a summary idea. In conclusion, video games on various electronic devices can have numerous negative effects to one's health when abused. That's her thesis. People who devote unhealthy amount of time playing video games can damage their physical, social, mental, and behavioral health. by possibly repeatedly being exposed to violent content and creating or contributing to a lifestyle that is mostly sedentary. A sedentary lifestyle, again, is one that lacks the components of being active and social. And those are essential elements in having a healthy everyday life. So she ends again by redefining the context of sedentarism and its definition. And a nice little wrap up here at the end. Then she moves on to works cited. And like I said, her works cited is very expansive. Maybe I didn't say that, but I'm saying it now. Her works cited entries are very expansive. She's talking about, things like how far back did video games go. Andreessen and Craig and others' violent video game effects on aggression, empathy, and prosocial behavior. That is one of the main articles that she pulled from the Desire to Learn page, and that itself came from the research databases available here at Kishwaukee College online. She cites the book, which is a good initial source to jump off of. So she had two sources kind of already at play. She got one from the internet that she just found. And then she had this piece, Global Games Market Value Rising. That's another piece that she found. Now, her research required her to think a little bit outside of her initial parameters to indicate how popular video gaming was, but it became a valuable source in underscoring her key point. She actually didn't cite from Jarvis, Michaela Jarvis, but she summarized her ideas from science in this portion: video games, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the potential, video games, the bad, the ugly, and the potentially good. Alana LeBlanc here is so quoted as well, and you can tell this one for sure was from our research databases. PLOS1 is one of those key databases that you can use. Gale and Context, and look, she even has, there it is, opposing viewpoints right there in big bold letters. She used another database just to kind of familiarize herself with the context of addictive video games. These are really good sources when you're trying to find where you feel your allegiances lie as they relate to these argumentative topics. These are short, really good bursts of information. Some of them are even contain audio versions of the file, so you can just listen to them as you're doing some other work. And that may spark an interest for you, or maybe just help you define what side of the debate that you feel you have some parlay with. And then Sandra O'Connell, these shoes are made for walking. Sensitivity, performance, and evaluation of commercial activity in minors under the expected conditions and circumstances required to achieve the international daily step goal of 10,000 steps. Again, from PLS1 and opposing viewpoints. And as I said, this is a successful written argument integrating logical claims, the well-researched and specific evidence. There were some grammar issues that you may want to address before it's ready for publication. And as you can see, I went a little harsh on the grammar mechanics this time, but the student still achieved an A for her due diligence. So again, I feel that this is a good way to kind of approach that assignment. If you'd like to see some more student essays as the weeks roll on, or some additional examples, you can set that up. Just make sure that you're using your class list link to contact Mr. Fowler, and I will set that up for you. Okay, so we did a little bit of preview and review. We talked about the fact that it's drafting week, and we looked at our student argumentative sample. We're getting ready to go through Ready Player One and review the chapters that you read in preparation for week 13, which are 33 through 37. So I want to say that because I know not everybody reads at the same pace, or maybe not even at the suggested pace. So you could pause the video here and come back when you've read those chapters if you want to do so. Okay, that can't hurt. Now, if you're still with me, that means you've either already read chapters 33 to 37 and you're ready for our chapter reviews, or you've read or finished the book, whatever, or you've had a chance to read them. Okay. The only other thing that I want to talk about this week is that you do have a week 13 discussion question referring back to the idea of Plato's parable of the cave, and how the cave, as it's described in that context, is comparable to the oasis and the way it's described in our novel. I think this would open up some really interesting ideas for discussion. So I'd be eager to see what you have to say about that. Then for next time, the only additional prep that you need to put into week 14 is to finish the novel, if you can dig that. I've been waiting to get to this point. Chapter 38 and 39 just fell outside of the standard 20-ish pages that I assign for students to read. Some students have no problem reading 20 plus pages. Some of you I know probably already finished the book at the midterm or something like that. But those two chapters were real short, 38 and 39, and I think they form a nice little couplet that we can use as one last PowerPoint session. So if you haven't finished the book, go ahead for week 14 and finish Ready Player One. Just as a little preview for next week will be spent for research. So I will have another video uploaded like this one, but it'll be a little bit shorter, because realistically, I think that I want to spend some time in review with the databases offered through Kishwaukee College, how to use those to the best of your ability. And maybe I'll even walk you through another student sample using that as a guide, using the resource components as a guide. And then we'll review, 38 and 39. And I'll offer up some final thoughts about the book. That will be just about it for next week. Then I suggest that you use most of week 14 to draft, trying to work at a rate of about 1 page per day. Because if you do that, if you think about it, if you're able to work at and get 1 page per day done starting this Monday, you'll be done way in advance of the due date. So I'd say on Monday, think just about how you want to structure the introduction. 5 to 8 sentences, just setting up the essay. Then on Tuesday, I don't expect you to write any more than maybe just one solid body paragraph, trying to make sure that you're outlining the support and reasoning that you'll need to justify your perspective. And then on Wednesday, you focus on a secondary support piece that you might need, or evidence that you might need to bring to bear for your reader. Then you move incrementally. Maybe you take Thursday off or Friday off. If you started doing that right now, you would be done you'd be done very quickly. You'd probably be done by next Monday. Now, does life work like that as a student? Probably not. However, I think if you work at a consistent rate starting this week, trying to get 1 paragraph done a day, you've got 3 weeks to get it done. You should have more than enough time. Okay, anyway, that was just a little bit of a preview and some cheerleading and some coaching from Mr. Fowler here. Okay, let's go ahead then and move into our discussion of chapters 33 to 37 for Ready Player One. I also like to mention when I'm going to start the PowerPoints, because if you've already read the chapters at this point and you think you have a good handle on them, you might want to even stop the video here, knowing that you have a key or a goal in mind of what you want to set up for next time. And then if you want to read the chapters at your own pace, you can do that. Or if you've already read the chapters and you don't need the review or you feel it's superfluous, you can use your time to the best of your ability. All right. I'm going to stop sharing here, and then I'm going to share, of course, our PowerPoints. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Now, let me see here. Slideshow from the beginning. Ready Player One, Kishwaukee College. And chapter 33 is one I've been waiting to get to for a while. Exit H, enter Helen. Okay. Level 3, chapter 33. This is probably, if I'm being honest with myself, the last really critical chapter that I think it's important for you to read. I want you to read the whole book and have the experience of reading the entire novel. I'm not saying you could stop after chapter 33 and just forget the rest of it because it's a big battle, but yeah, you know, it's a big it's a big action piece pretty much after chapter 33. But some of the things that occur as a result of those action pieces are pretty fascinating. So, you know, if you've come this far, why not finish? Okay. So chapter 33 ends with an interesting component, hearkening back to the previous chapter, where a mysterious voice appears seemingly from nowhere to fill the empty space of H's virtual basement, claiming that he could help the High Five or the remainder of the High Five to achieve their goal of defeating IOI and Sorrento. But in order to do that, they're going to need to find a safe physical position from which to conduct their virtual war. And we get an explanation from the owner of the voice, Ogden Morrow. And this is prior to the original launch of the Oasis, when Jim and I, Jim being James Halliday, created our avatars. We gave ourselves super user access to the entire simulation. In addition to being immortal and invincible, our avatars could go pretty much anywhere and do pretty much anything. In other words, OG here, or Ogden Morrow, was the invisible avatar that knocked over the comic books in the basement, I think back in chapter, 17 or 18. So he's been watching them for this entire time. That's slightly creepy and more than a little invasive. But then again, as we are all constantly made aware, it seems like Google, other instrumentation that we use, our phones, they all seem to be sort of omnipresently spying on us, or at least listening to us, even if it's just to benignly look for ways to exploit us as potential consumers. Now, Ogden explains, he says, I'm not going to give you clues or provide you with any information that will help you reach the actual egg itself. But just before he died, I promised Jim that in his absence, I'd do everything I could to protect the spirit and integrity of the contest. And that's why he appeared to them. Meaning that IOI kind of violates the spirit and integrity of the contest by using some of the techniques that they've used, like blocking off the planet of Sithonia or cordoning off Castle Anorak or something like that. And he admits that he's been eavesdropping for some time. He said, I want to offer the four of you sanctuary at my home in Oregon. And from here, you'll be able to execute your plan and complete your quest in safety without having to worry about 6 or agents tracking you down, kicking in your doors. I can provide each of you with a state-of-the-art immersion rig, as well as a fiber optic connection to the Oasis, and anything else that you might need. Now, in the film, he doesn't spy on them in the same way, but it is revealed that he, of course, is the curator of the Halliday archives, and thus his presence is made obvious in that way. Some people have suggested that the description in the book kind of harkens back to Professor Emmett Brown from Back to the Future, which would be another reference, but there's no direct comparison. I think they did a nice job adapting that look, or a very similar look, for the film version. And we have a call to arms in this chapter. A very well done piece in the film adaptation, I think, with the Twisted Sister anthem blaring on the boombox in reference to "Say Anything" from the John Husak, John Husak, sorry, John Cusack collaboration with the great Mr. Hughes, in one of his Chicago-based performances. So Wade says that some of the news feeds are already running the video clip of Daito's murder. Remember, Daito is thrown from the balcony of his apartment on the 34th floor that I'd sent them, along with the text of Sorrento's memo, which cites an anonymous source for both. So this is part of the rallying cry that Wade sort of launches into in order to, like I said, rally the totality of the Oasis so that he can have an army sufficient enough to match that of the Sixer Armada, or Sixer army that's waiting for them. Now, it's decided that Shoto and Artemis are going to make their own way to Oregon. But H mentions that he is going to have to pass through Columbus, Ohio to reach Oregon. So he might as well pick Wade up. And of course, the first thing that we see is his RV, H's RV. And it says it was just a few yards away, parked on the curb. A mocha-colored Sunrider about 20 feet long and at least 2 decades old. I tried my best to find a mocha-colored Sunrider, but this is at least a Sunrider. I couldn't find one in that exact shade. It was powered by a patchwork of solar cells covered by the RV's roof and most of its body, along with a liberal amount of rust. And the windows were tinted black, so I couldn't see inside. And of course, once he enters, he meets H in real life. She was a heavy-set African-American girl in the RV's seat, clutching the wheel tightly and staring straight ahead. She was about my age, with short, kinky hair and chocolate-colored skin that appeared iridescent in the soft glow of the dashboard indicators. She was wearing a vintage Rush 2112 concert t-shirt. Aha! No wonder H was able to get the crystal key. And the numbers were wrapped around her large bosom. She also had a faded black jeans and a pair of studded combat boots. She appeared to be shivering, although it was nice and warm in the cab, obviously nervous to finally meet Wade in real life. I stood there for a moment, staring at her in silence, waiting for her to acknowledge my presence. Eventually, she turned and smiled at me, and it was a smile I recognized immediately. That Cheshire grin I'd seen 1,000 times before on the face of H's avatar. So Helen, we learn, is really named Helen Harris, and often uses a Caucasian male avatar, which she disguises as the character H. And she does this, we learn, during the long road trip from Columbus, Ohio to Oregon, because it's something that she learned from her mother. Her mother said at one point in the novel that if she had to compete with other Caucasian men for jobs, and these jobs were virtual positions, she might as well give herself the leg up by appearing in a way and shape that the people in a position to hire her may have expected. So this is a really interesting theme, and perhaps one that might be well suited to an argumentative form of essay, in that you know, we still have a long way to go in terms of equal representation. And there's a lot to be said about the issue of representation, right? Like, it can't be completely across the board, because where are the female bricklayers is a good example I've heard tossed out before. But that's not what's, like, right? If all things were equal, there would be more female bricklayers in the world than there are. Well, obviously there are some physical demands with that job that, while I'm sure there are plenty of women who could do the job and probably show up some of the men, it's not perhaps a job that carries with it a position of or a upper, it doesn't present itself as a glamorous job. Therefore, that's not in keeping with the kind of equal representation that people are thinking about. But if you take the idea on its purely, on its pure basis, there would be, right, an equal amount of women who are bricklayers. But that's not obviously what people are talking about. They're just saying that qualified candidates should be able to compete in an open market in a logical way, and they shouldn't be, the hiring process should not be biased by one's gender or one's ethnicity or something like that. But that's just not always the reality. Even though we've got laws in place to sort of help, erode some of those old boy systems, they still occur on occasion. So one way that the OASIS provides its own unique method to buck that particular trend is that when you go to work in a virtual situation, nobody has to know what you look like or who you are. They only have to see your avatar. And we see the same sort of thing going on in the school system too. Because in the school system, as Wade explains, your options for creating a school-based avatar are limited, right? Now, during this long cross-country trek, we also learned that Helen's mother has an issue with her sexuality. Helen at one point comes out as a lesbian, and her mom's reaction is to kick her out of the house because it's too jarring for Helen's mother. So this also raises some questions of representation from the LGBTQ+ community, which also may have a very prominent stake in something like the OASIS, because the OASIS presents the option for a world in which you're able to move about as your true identity, whatever you perceive that to be. So Ernest Cline, while he spends a lot of time talking about 80s pop culture and video games and silly magical things, here, finally, if you're able to hang on long enough to ride the whole process out, we get into some really compelling issues. I kind of wish there was more time spent on H in this book. I'm reading the sequel right now, and I'm not far enough into it to say whether or not that comes to bear. If you're a Prince fan, you might find it interesting, but on a totally separate note. But again, this is something that is an interesting facet to consider as we move into a world that's more digital, that is more virtual. People can adapt identities that they're perhaps not necessarily born into, but that serve the people they become through their lives, through the act of living their lives. And as such, a very possible and interesting topic might be whether or not virtual spaces could be considered safe or safer spaces for some non-binary citizens to inhabit, that may be more or equanimical, or more what's the word I'm struggling to come up with here? That may be more I don't know. It may be a safer alternative in some way, shape, or form. Not to say that representation doesn't need to continue to make strides in reality and real physical spaces, but I'm curious about that. Is the internet, is the virtual condition something that's helping to raise our awareness of some of these bigger issues about fairness and equity in society? I said equanimity, I think, earlier, but equity in society. I don't know. That may be an interesting topic that you can pursue. Okay. Wade explains that, a wave of emotion washes over him. Shock gave way to a sense of betrayal at first. And this is interesting. How could she deceive me all these years? I felt my face flush with embarrassment as I remembered all the adolescent intimacies I'd shared with H. A person I trusted implicitly, someone I thought I knew. She kept stealing glances at me, then her eyes would dart away nervously. She was still trembling. She's nervous as well, probably thinking of the exact same series of thought sequences or very close to it as Wade is. Whatever anger or anger or sense of betrayal I felt quickly evaporated. I couldn't help myself, and I started to laugh. There was no meanness in it. Then she started to laugh too. Here we are. It's good to see you, old friend, I said. And they get a lot of detail explained through this long cross-country trek, which I've already referred to enough times now. And finally, they arrive in Oregon. Ernest Cline references the magical elven city of Rivendell from The Lord of the Rings as something akin to Ogden Morrow's home. And the first thing that Wade wants to know when he arrives is where the heck Artemis is. And Og shook his head, explaining that Artemis felt that meeting you two right now would be an unnecessary distraction. She wanted to wait until after the big event, and Shoto seemed to agree. He studied me for a moment. It's probably for the best, You've all got a big day ahead of you. But spoilers, we're going to find out more about Artemis, aka Samantha Cook, in the next few chapters. So we have a sense of Kira again, and this is a big moment where Ogden Morrow gets to sort of share the spotlight as a character. He's been in the background quite a bit up to this point, but here we actually get the reveal of what happened to his wife and the relationship with Halliday and how that all kind of came to a head. And he explains it was all because of Kira. My wife, like me, was someone meaning James Halliday, had been in love with since high school. Right? She was the gal that broke up the band, so to speak. Of course, he never had the courage to act on it. So she never knew how James Halliday felt about her. And really, neither did he. Neither did Ogden Morrow. In fact, he didn't tell me about it until the last time I spoke to him right before he died. And even then, it was hard for him to communicate with me. Jim was never very good with people or expressing his emotions. So unfortunately, Halliday's love for Kira and his inability to act on it drove a wedge between his friendship with Ogden Morrow, who is really his only good friend. And that's really kind of terrible. Chapter rounds out with one more reference, the origin of the strange sequence Reindeer Flotilla Cetic Astronomy, which is a double reference to Tron, the 1980s film, kind of the first film to explore the idea of a virtual reality, and the movie Sneakers about 60s dissidents who were some of the first computer hackers, in which the phrase Cetic astronomy is an anagram of too many secrets. Okay, so here we go. The next few chapters roll by pretty quickly. The Battle for the Oasis Part 1 takes place in Level 3, Chapter 34. The first thing that must be done is, of course, to remove the great force field around Castle Anorak. So Wade and the High Five are met by a veritable army of Gunters on the planet Sithonia who are going to take on the massive IOI army. Wade explains that when I emerged from the Stargate in Sector 10, my radar screen lit up like a Christmas tree. Thousands of other vehicles of every make and model were crawling through the starry blackness around me. Everything from a single-seater craft to giant moon-sized freighters, and I had never seen so many starships in one place, right? But as the battle commences, did I skip one? Yeah, nope. As the battle commences, we find out that having himself beaten the Black Tiger video game challenge, Sorrento has a mech. And not just any mech. How timely, given his new, spoilers, appearance in Kong versus Godzilla. It's Mecha Godzilla. And despite being equipped with Lepardon, his own giant mech, and surrounded by his friends, IOI and Sorrento are more than ready for the challenge. And that's where SDO3 comes in. Wade explains that the Sixers, again, had erected a large armored bunker behind Anorak filled with pallets of weapons and battle gear. There was also a long track of 30 supply droids, which had been installed along the bunker's eastern wall, modeled after the robot Johnny Five from the film Short Circuit. One of the supply droids, designation SD3, powered itself on and disengaged from its charging dock. It then rolled forward on its tank treads, crossing the bunker floor to the armory cage at its opposite end. SDO3 transmitted its equipment requisition order, which Wade had submitted through the Sixer intranet 2 days earlier before he escaped from the Loyalty Center. SDO3 lifted up an antimatter friction bomb over its head and detonated it, killing the IOI wizard who was running the orb of Osavox and destroying the orb itself in the process, which leads us into Level 3, Chapter 35, the second half of the Battle for the Oasis. And sorry, we do not actually get to see the Iron Giant in the book, but I loved his inclusion in the film adaptation. Or its inclusion, rather. It's a robot. Shoto makes his move. Wade doesn't think that even with the 3 mechs they have, H, Shoto, Artemis, and Wade himself, so 4, he doesn't think they can destroy Mechagodzilla. So instead, they make a break for the castle. And while the other battle is going on, Wade explains that the Gunters who are on the ground fighting with the IOI troops, they don't even bother to head for the castle because they know they can't get in because they don't have one of the copies of the Crystal Key. The IOI folks, the Sixers, lock them out of that as a potential. So they engage the Sixers directly. Shoto makes a move here, and instead of heading for the castle like the other 3, he banks and flies in straight at Sorrento, closing the distance between them in a space of a few seconds. So Shoto has a Gundam, very similar to the film adaptation device. And like the character in the film, which is actually Daito, who unfortunately is dead in this adaptation. He pays the price. He fights through and tries to destroy Mechagodzilla, but he fails. He says, Shoto, look out, but his voice was drowned by the sound of lightning weapon firing out of the metal dragon's mouth, and it nails Shoto's mech directly in the center of his back, and he exploded in a ball of orange fire. His name disappeared from the scoreboard, meaning he was dead. Now, he's not physically dead in real life, not like Daito is, but he's spent his time to try to buy his friends a chance to enter Castle Anorak. But Wade gets waylaid. The Mechagodzilla unit is just too good and too fast. But then he remembers that he has the beta capsule. that he earned from a what was it? A quest that he completed with Dido and Shoto, and at the end, Dido gave it to him as an honorary gift. And so he uses the beta capsule and is able to transform into the giant superhero Ultraman for a period of 3 minutes, in which he lays waste. Lays waste to Sorrento's Mechagodzilla. That effectively destroys Sorrento's mech and cancels him as well. So that's the end of Sorrento. He's gone. No longer in the way. He approaches Castle Anorak with Wade, Wade approaches Castle Anorak with H and Artemis. And of course, they're able to get access because they each have a copy of the crystal key. And they're met with a large crystal door. Wade recites the lyrics to Three's the magic number from Schoolhouse Rock, which he'd informed them about earlier, and 3 keyholes appear in the gate. Wade, Artemis, and H each use their keys, turning them clockwise and experiencing a brief flash of blue light, during which all of our keys and the crystal door itself vanished. And then the third gate stood open in front of us, a crystal doorway leading into a spinning whirlpool of stars. But as the 3 of us stepped forward, preparing to enter the gate, I heard an ear-splitting boom. It sounded like the entire universe was cracking in half, and all 3 of their avatars died. What? That's right. The catalyst, which was described along with Findoro's Mirror of Finding, and I think in chapter 22 or 21, was purchased, unfortunately, by the forces of IOI and was detonated by a loyal IOI soldier. It killed everybody. But Wade, of course, had taken a little side journey and earned an extra life. He reasons again that the Sixers detonated a cataclysm, which kills the user and every other player in a extremely large area. Not only had it killed every avatar in that sector, the word I was groping for there, it had even destroyed Castle Anorak, a fortress that up until that point had proven itself to be indestructible. But Wade says, I was staring at the open gate, floating in the empty air and waiting for the inevitable final message to appear at the center of his display. The words he knew every other avatar in the sector must be seeing. Game over. But when the words finally did appear, it was another message. Congratulations, you have an extra life. So he tries the gate again. Unfortunately, as he returns to virtual life, he finds that the gate is several feet above him, floating where it was on the foundation of Castle Anorak, and he can't physically get there, even in the virtual realm. He can't reach it. And he says there's nothing to help him. His inventory was empty except for the quarter he obtained from playing the perfect Pac-Man game on Arcade. But all of the gear from the other avatars is laying around as just a bunch of sundry junk. At first, he thinks I'll use the beta capsule again to become Ultraman, and I'll be tall enough to step through, but it only can be used once within a 24-hour period, so it's no good. But then Artemis comes to the rescue and says, use my black Chuck Taylor tennis shoes. Mr. Fowler can brag about the fact that he actually owns a pair of Chuck Taylors just like this. So maybe they'll give me a little luck in real life if I don't have the abilities that they grant in the Oasis, which is flight. So he's able to actually use these to fly up and enter the gate. But before he goes through, he makes his friends an offer that they probably wouldn't refuse even if they could. He says, I just wanted to tell you all that it's not fair that you were killed in the process of playing the game the correct way. IOI cheated. And so he says, if I reach the egg, if I am successful, I'm going to split the prize money equally amongst all 4 of us. H and Shoto, of course, are very ecstatic right away, but Artemis is dubious. And she says, I don't suppose I can get that in writing. And Wade says, well, probably not. You're just going to have to trust me on this one. Which leads us to level 3, chapter 37, The Tempest. So there's a message that appears once he steps through the gate. Beat the high score or be destroyed, it says. It's my best attempt at an automated voice. He steps through the crystal gate and emerges inside of the video game The Tempest from 1981 by Atari. And he says, uh-oh, we've got a problem. This is not a game I'm particularly good at. Now, the Shakespeare reference is probably one that I think is really interesting. If you know anything about Shakespeare, you'll know that one of the last plays he wrote was called The Tempest, about a group of British sailors who crash land in the New World, and they must explore the New World, which is inhabited by a mysterious wizard named Prospero and his strange son. What is his name? Cabal or something like that, I think. No, I'm mixing up Clive Barker here. Caliban, his Prospero's strange son is named Caliban. And again, the reference here from Shakespeare, I must uneasy make, lest too light winning make the prize light. So, in other words, Halliday must have known his Shakespeare too, and he said, okay, a very difficult game is appropriate for the final game challenge. References galore here as Artemis shows off that knowledge, and also explains that the video game, The Tempest, is playing in the background of Rush's Suburbs video. So we get another Rush reference too. But luckily, there's a cheat for Tempest, which Artemis explains. She says this is the very first version that shipped with a bug in the game code. Kids discovered that if you died with a certain score, the machine would give you a bunch of free credits. So you waste one life to achieve a certain score with the promise of getting a whole bunch of extra lives. And it works. So Wade is actually able to beat the game Tempest. And as a result, the light fades in and he finds himself in another flick sync, this time Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, which is one of Wade's favorite movies, and he's able to recite it easily. And then after he completes that challenge, he emerges in a recreation of Halliday's office, where he, quote, took another long look around, surveying the line of monuments to the history of computing and video games. That was when I realized that the oval-shaped ring in which they were all arranged actually formed the outline of an egg, of course. And that's where we'll have to stop for this time. So I'm going to restore the video. I hope that you've found this these passages interesting or illustrative of some of the key ideas in the final portion of Klein's book. Next time when we get together, like I said, I will walk you through the last two chapters, chapter 38 and 39. If you're waiting, though, don't wait on me. By all means, go ahead and pick up the text and finish the book. We'll talk about that next time, and we'll talk about research, and then it will be up to you to start to formulate your final argument, your last essay for the semester. And unless I miss my guess, based on the work that you've all turned in so far, I think they're going to be very good papers indeed, and I look forward to reading them. But until next time, this is Mr. Fowler signing off, reminding you to get enough sleep, read a lot, and think critically. All right, that's it for me. We'll talk some more next week. Bye now.